John. Good morning, everybody, and absolutely thrilled to be here at FuturOps. It's an absolute delight. I'm honoured to be giving the keynote on the first day of the first FuturOps conference. I've had the chance to see some people. John mentioned that people have flown in from all over, from Korea, from India, from Europe, and of course Canada, and here in the good old US of A. And it's been great so far to have those discussions, to hear about what people are doing within the Palantir community. I'm always amazed at how the Palantir universe is expanding, the different dimensions that it has. And this conference today feels like one of those moments, one of those singular moments where we're about to start something special. And I look forward to coming to this for years and years in the future, if invited. We'll see how this goes. I think firstly, I'd just like to say a massive well done to John and his team. I can't quite see how John has done this, running his company and putting this on. I know he's had a fantastic team around him. I know he's had his dad help him as well, which is great, creeping in the family. So I want to start by just doing a massive round of applause to John and his team for everything they've done here. And so I'm going to have to call out the irony of me standing here, so just bear with me for a moment. So the first irony I recognize is you'll probably pick up from my accent that I'm not from America, I'm from the United Kingdom. That Palantir outpost that some people may have heard of. Palantir is significant in the UK. It's driving a lot of defense, driving a lot of health. Dr. Karp makes regular visits there and makes big announcements about the investments being made. And legend has it that Foundry is actually developed there in London. But it is the outpost. And I recognize a UK person opening this conference here in the heart of the engine room that is Palantir is a little ironic. The other irony that strikes me, and John almost alluded to it there, is that if this conference had have been a week ago, I would have been standing here very differently, or I wouldn't have been standing here at all. So a week ago, I was the co-founder and one of the managing directors of Deco. Deco is a UK-based Palantir consultancy. We started it a year ago, and myself and two other ex-Palantirians, focused predominantly in the public sector, a lot of work in defense. Unfortunately, that's why I won't be able to tell many stories about the work we're doing. Grown that rapidly and enjoyed everything about the Palantir consultancy journey. If that was last week, but I wouldn't have been on the stage, because last week we joined the Accenture family, and hence why I'm now stood here with an Accenture badge. Well, it's not there, but not that I don't mind wearing it, but it's just a bit of a split personality thing, and hence why John referred to it. And I'm delighted now that Deco's joined Accenture, and what I'm going to do, I think, through the next 10, 15 minutes or so, just talk about some of the aspects of what has taken us on that journey. I actually asked ChatGPT what I should call this presentation, and it came up with a view that it should be called Boutique to Global Empire, a Journey. I'm not going with that one, all right, I'm not going to subject you to that. I will talk about sort of the reinvention of future operations. But anyway, good old ChatGPT, get some things right. If you'll allow me, I'd like to start with a quote. I'm going to read the first part of the quote, and a bit of audience participation if you want. You can shout out who you think actually said this. So, awesome to see the ecosystem around Palantir exploding in such dynamic ways. Right, who do you think said that? Did someone say Karp? It is quite Karp, isn't it? It wasn't Karp. I'll take one more guess. Okay, it's Ted Mabry. So I'm sure everyone in the room knows who Ted Mabry is. So Ted said, awesome to see the ecosystem around Palantir exploding in such dynamic ways. This could almost be the byline for FuturOps. You think about everyone in this room, what they are doing. That is what is happening. Ted goes on to say, we intend to build the backbone of a very large economy that would define the enduring, real economic returns of the AI era. Well, I don't know if that, for me, that's a call to arms. That's everything that we are doing. That's what we're driving. That's what we're building. That's the opportunity that presents itself with what we're doing with Palantir. And the final thing he says is, seeing giants nimble enough to get ahead of where the puck is going is cool. Now, I wouldn't have known what that meant until 2 nights ago, where friends from Canada, Dan, Chris, Neil, took me to see the Dallas Stars. And so now I understand what hockey is. And I also know how difficult it is to follow the puck, let alone get ahead of it. So I can see the significance of this statement. Seeing giants nimble enough to get ahead of where the puck is going is cool. Upstarts building very creative businesses around and on top of Palantir is perhaps even cooler. So that quote comes from LinkedIn, where else? It was in the context of Deco joining Accenture, but I actually think it speaks to much more than that. It speaks to exactly what this FuturOps conference is around. When I reflect on some of the comments in there about what it's going to be building, the backbone, and I think about people's relationship with Palantir, I think we all in the room know that Palantir is not necessarily a straightforward piece of software or an organization, but we all build our own relationship with it. I'm going to put aside any of the sort of discourse around Palantir or any discussion of the share price, because I'm sure some have done well and some may wish they had have held on to them. But let's put all that to one side. What I'm talking about here is just the relationship with the software and what it can do. I mean, I always reflect that you don't get many people jumping up and down about PowerPoint, maybe some consultants, but not in the same way that you have people talking about Palantir and the power that it has. Looking across the schedule for today, and John's put a fantastic schedule together, I'm just bowled over by the sheer breadth and depth of what people are achieving with Palantir software. You look at some of the sessions around scaling of AI, harnessing of large language models, the predictive analytics, some of the risk stuff around fraud, the training elements, all of this, the breadth and depth of sheer creativity that is allowed to happen with Palantir software. And I think when we look at all these sessions through the day and the experience we've got in the room, I think what we're seeing is that redefinition of future operations. If I could tell you a little bit about my journey with Palantir. So I first was introduced to Palantir in 2018. I was working for the UK government. They had Gotham. We'll say no more on that. And we had endorsement from the top. We had that top cover for using this technology. We did the training. We did a week of training. And we tagged some of our data. Not all of it. It got a bit tiresome. And we then scratched our heads what to do. And then we went back to our old ways. And we didn't embrace it and we didn't use it. And I think, and it'd be interesting in conversations later, that will be an experience common to many users of Palantir. But the possibility of what it was presenting was there. You could see it, but we didn't have clarity around what the purpose was, what the problem was we were going after. And we didn't have that deep capability to actually realize the value. Play forward a few years, and I was thinking about what was happening in the world, what was happening in government, and my conclusion was that the big changes that are happening in government, in the world, are not being driven by government, not being driven by those classic institutions. The big agents of change was actually coming from outside of government. It was actually coming from places like technology. And more specifically, it was coming from organizations like Palantir. I was very fortunate at that point to be able to join Palantir in the UK, in what's known as Grey Havens. I spent 2.5 years at Palantir. I did numerous different jobs. I had one of those sort of esoteric roles called strategist. I had the opportunity to work in defense. I worked with partners trying to build their capability, trying to build their capacity to try and create this ecosystem in the UK. And I worked also with the NHS, National Health Service, on what some of you may have, it's one of the flagship projects that happens and is ongoing now in the UK, the Federated Data Platform, which was bold and courageous, and Palantir pushed so hard for this to create this. And it's really a reimagining of what the National Health Service can be. So I had the opportunity to see lots of different engineering approaches that Palantir were taking. But I think more importantly, what I saw from being inside the belly of the beast, if I may, is that way of operating, to swim in that river, to see what it is to have that culture, to have that mindset of how you really wring the value out of this technology, out of this platform. So what does that look like? What does that mean? So some of the phrases you may have heard when people talk about Palantir is this colony of artists. And it comes together in this hive mind. And this hive mind is where you can share ideas, be creative, and collaborate. And you see that happening with these brilliant people. But what are they collaborating on? And it's that mission. It's that sense of mission. And interestingly, there's a blog I think that Noam has just done talking about the mission mode. And I think it captures very well that sense of what Palantir is able to do, what Palantir is focused on. And it's that constraint, that focus, that absolute laser-like demand to get impact, to have real-world impact. And that's pretty enthralling to be part of. And that's what we're all involved in. So I came to a conclusion to leave Palantir, and let's not talk about the timing and the share prices. I won't keep going on about the timing and the share prices, I promise. But I came to the conclusion to leave Palantir, and why was it? And I think this is a moment that I just want to pause, because I think this is really, for me, integral to us being here, to the discussions we're having. My reflection and my two co-founders' reflection was that we are at a particularly urgent moment. And that urgent moment is our responsibility collectively to actually grasp. What is that urgent moment? We have at our fingertips one of the most powerful tools. And that tool can have massive societal impact. It can have massive organizational impact. But we have to do it now. And my sense, and this is why I started Deco, was that Palantir can't do it alone. They need us. They need our capability. They need our belief. They need our drive. And so we started Deco. Now, when we started Deco, we started with a grand vision. Very, very quietly said, because we're from the UK, so we do these things very gently and delicately. But that was to take the best parts of what Palantir does and then supercharge them with other elements to really try and bring the power of that platform and have real impact and work with clients and customers and organizations to really realize that value. And that took a number of different parts, has a number of different elements, which I want to share with you, because I think you may recognize them, and I'd be interested in conversation later whether you challenge some of these. Because it goes beyond just the technology. It goes beyond us just thinking about, in awe at what they've built and what they continue to build, which is significant. Firstly, we looked at people, and we thought about the people that we need. And we very much took the view that we don't need to recruit from certain universities. We don't need people who've necessarily passed through the hallowed turf of Palantir. In fact, if you look at the composition of Deco, we've got academics, we've got ex-government servants, we've got ex-consultants and people from industry. But we've also got military veterans, and we've got school leavers and college leavers. And we're really focused on that apprenticeship pathway, giving people that early opportunity to really build something, a foundation for the rest of their career. Because this is here to stay, and this is the place to be, without a doubt. And when we look at those individuals, how do we determine what that looks like? It isn't an identikit. It isn't this is what it is. But we look for two things. There's that aptitude that we assess, and we assess it based on what we know the chemistry with Palantir technology looks like. And then we look at the attitude. Do they want to make a difference? Are they passionate about this? Do they want to have an impact? Do they want to be staying on the cutting edge? We know that keeping up with Palantir software is tough. We know that the advent of the large language models and the application of AI in the context of Palantir needs you to keep moving faster and faster. And that needs certain kinds of people to do that. But on top of that, we recognize that we can't just leave these people to build on their own, to build their capability on their own. And because you probably have seen that, and I saw it firsthand in government, and being on your own trying to do that is very, very hard. So you need to put the enablement round. You need to put the capability drive, that real support in place. And that isn't just a week-long course, as we probably all know. It's an ongoing process. It has to be nurtured and fed, and it has to be challenged, and it has to be pushed. So we thought very carefully in Deco about what that would look like. So we have our training programs, we have our onboarding, but we have ongoing, constant dialogue with all of our team. We create the space, the threads, the forums that allows us to continuously play back and teach back what we're learning on client site and bringing that back in. We've created our lab, which allows us to create that knowledge repository. So we're building this compounding data asset of what works with the software. We actively ask our people to be ignorant, to challenge, to say when they don't know, and then allow the hive mind to pile in on them and come up with it. Come up with the answers. And then we hold that and we allow that, and we create an AIP bot that can then surface all of that good and rich information, so it's continuously for us learning. That capability then comes together with the person, that ability to communicate, to convince, to persuade, to influence, to be able to really get under the skin of clients' problems and work with them to create the solutions. But all of that was not enough. We, very early on, in fact from sort of day -1, said, and I don't like the phrase, but hopefully you'll get what I mean. We've got to eat our own dog food. So what do we mean by that? We became a Palantir customer. We got our own stack. And that was a really important move for us. It showed our commitment, of course, to Palantir. It enabled us to understand what Palantir customers go through, which is a good thing. But most importantly, it allowed us to build, and to build consistently and coherently through the business. So first and foremost, we were doing our learning on our stack, but we were also building our business on it. So we didn't want superfluous software. We wanted to have it all applications that we built, that we would maintain. So that moment when someone says, that doesn't work, where you say that's fine, go and fix it, go and build it better. I know that Paul from Ranger is doing a session on what they've built. I've seen some of their stuff. Looks absolutely phenomenal, and I'm really excited to see that, and him to talk about that. But more than just building the company on Foundry and building all of the applications that we needed to run a professional services firm, we also wanted to let our junior engineers loose on what was happening, on what they could do, what they could create. And I just want to give you 2 examples of things that were built. So the first one of our very junior engineers, straight out of university, picked up that a client was having a particular issue, particular friction in their ability to deliver. And it was caused by lack of car parking space. And so he created an app which effectively took the car park map and in real time was able to see where the spaces were and direct cars to it. He even built it so that you could see what the weather was when you were parking your car in case you were going to get wet. We haven't put that into production. But the other one, another of our junior engineers, noticed that in our office we had a lot of plants to try and give it a nice human touch. And they weren't being watered consistently. So what he did was he put some sensors and he put some pipes and some valves and some pumps. And he rigged that all up to Foundry to look at humidity and moisture. And now he created an automatic app that would water our plants. He calls it Thirst Responder. And that probably will not go into production either. Although, who knows? Maybe if there's anyone interested, I'm happy to pick that up with them. So we brought all that together in Deco. And when we step back and we think about the sort of FuturOps and what does that mean? Why is that significant? And why have we taken that now into Accenture? I think for me, the essence of all of that is it comes together in an engineering approach. This is engineering-led consulting. There's lots of talk now about forward deployed engineers. I know Palantir sort of hold that they were the first to do this. And there's some brilliant stuff out there, some brilliant writings on what forward deployed engineering is. And I subscribe to it. I think it's a fantastic concept. At Deco, we call our people consulting engineers. We want them to be engineers. We want them to be also consultants. We want that connection of the two. But that engineering-led consulting, I think, for me, is what defines what the future operations are, both for consultancies, but also for users, for institutions that have Palantir technology. Because it's not just the preserve of consultants. It's absolutely just a way of operating, a way of thinking. And what do I mean by that? So it's that default to action. It's that looking at what you can build rather than what you're talking about or putting on slides. It's showing real stuff really happening. It's that ability to think through the foundations of what you're building from a very, very logical, from the ontology, what you're building into the future. What are those foundations? And it's also thinking about how do you support that? And some of the guys, girls back in the office will laugh at this when I say, it's thinking about what documentation you might need that will underpin this, will allow this to be supported as you go forward. That essence of incrementally delivering, doing things that will make a big difference longer term, but doing it in a way that you make sustainable from the outset. That's that very essence of that engineering-led consulting. For us at Deco, joining with Accenture, it's that scale that allows us. It's that access to capability, people, technology, and of course, to some of the most important client problems. So when I reflect on that moment that I talk about, the urgency that we have, that all of us in the room, the reason we're here is because I think we sense that urgency, the importance of what we're doing. I just reflect on what actually does that mean? And for me, it means that possibility. The possibilities that we now have at our fingertips because of the Palantir software, because of the capability that you have, and because of the way we're operating with this engineering-led approach. And the dimensions of that for me. Firstly, it's the purpose before the platform. That purpose, why are we doing it? What's the outcome we're driving for? That purpose, before we get to what the platform is. It's about the people. It's about empowering the people. And very much, we see that as being not just the capability that we have in-house, but also about what exists in the client and what exists in the customer and what exists in the organization. And how do you build that capability and how do you maintain it? How do you continue to create it? Because I think we all experienced, and I was talking to Joe, if he's in here, a couple of nights back, and talking about like some of the people who pick up this technology and run with it in ways that you wouldn't imagine. And we need to capture that, and we need to supercharge that, and we need to empower that. So that people empowerment. And the final piece really is about what that long-term capability looks like. How do you build this so it's supportable? Because there's one thing building something quickly, but there's another thing about ensuring that it will last and maintain. One of my early engineers, junior engineers, in his first week said, we were talking about Silicon Valley and some of the philosophies of Silicon Valley, and he said, it sounds as though what we do is move fast and fix things, and I quite like that as a mantra. What we're trying to achieve, I think, is brilliant outcomes for our clients, for our institutions, for our organizations. That is the opportunity that is afforded to us, I would say, by this future operating approach. For me, the progress isn't inevitable. It is engineered, and it's down to all of us to get building. Thank you.